Welcome to the first fall webinar of the HeatSmart Tompkins program, and we're partnering today with our friends and neighbors to the north and west, HeatSmart Central New York. HeatSmart is a local nonprofit, and we are dedicated to cost savings, comfortable, healthy homes, and climate solutions for your home. We don't make any profit off of any sales that you may contract with installers as part of the program. We're just here for information and outreach and support purposes. So let's see. Okay. So HeatSmart Tompkins is part of the NYSERDA Clean Heating and Cooling Communities, which you can see on this map. This map does need to be updated though, because we now are serving Chemung and Tompkins counties, so that we need to color Chemung County in yellow. And welcome to some Chemung neighbors that are on the call today. And there are some new clean heating and cooling communities being added to this map. So if you join us for a webinar about a month from now, you might see a new map with more counties filled in being served by clean heating and cooling communities. What's really exciting for the Tompkins County HeatSmart program is that we were the first HeatSmart program. We started it as a grassroots effort. It came out of something called Solar Tompkins, where we were promoting solar panel installations. And that program was so successful that the group decided to turn themselves to clean heating and cooling, and founded the first HeatSmart program. And NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, decided it was such a great idea that they decided to fund similar programs all across New York State, which you can see here. So we're small but mighty, and we're joined by HeatSmart Central New York, which serves the 5 counties in light blue here: Onondaga, Cortland, Seneca, and 2 others that I can't remember, but I'll tell you later. These ones. Okay. Next slide. So why is it important to have clean heating and cooling communities anyway? Well, the reason is that you might have heard about this climate crisis that we're in right now, and the importance of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And this is how we emit greenhouse gases in New York. This pie chart on the left, it's about 40% transportation and about 40% on-site combustion. And then 20-something% is electricity. And on-site combustion, a big chunk of that, a huge chunk of that, is heating and cooling buildings. And the reason for that is that 90% of our homes are heated by burning fossil fuels in New York State, which is a lot of homes. If you multiply by how many people live in New York. So if we're going to do our part to stave off the climate crisis a bit longer and to meet New York State's now under law climate goals, we need to tackle this on-site combustion in buildings. It's very, very important. And it's one of the most important pieces, and it's one of the most difficult, because each house is its own little fossil burning system as it stands now. So each one of those has to be changed over to a different system. And that's where HeatSmart comes in. So what HeatSmart does is because each individual building owner has to make decisions for their own building, there's a lot of barriers to that. There's time, there's money, there's not knowing what to do. So we try to fill that gap. We remove barriers to people taking action by connecting people with information, connecting people with the incentives that help make these things affordable, and connecting you with our trusted installer partners, people that we know will give you good information and do good work for you if you should decide to go forward to a contract with them. So how do we do this information sharing with the public? Well, we used to try to come to the public and meet people where they were in their homes and their libraries and their town halls. And now, of course, with COVID, that's quite challenging. So we are switched to this webinar format. We really encourage people to make use of our website. It has a lot of information on it, and there's just a lot to explore there. We have a learning room where you can walk yourself through some of this information. Webinars such as this, after we do them, are posted on the website. Home tours, fact sheets, case studies. We have all kinds of information on there for you. And so we also have this webinar series, of which this is the first. We're going to have virtual home tours where you can meet a homeowner who has had insulation and air sealing and heat pumps installed into their house, and you can ask them questions and meet the contractor that did the work and ask them questions. We also will have a series of clean energy topics, such as this one. So, and then if you're concerned, as many people rightly are, about exposure, if you want to have a home assessment done, our installers have all developed methods for giving you a home assessment remotely. They don't even have to come to your house. Of course, they do like to come to your house and meet you in person. So if you are comfortable with that, they will come and they will be masked and respectfully social distanced from you and take good care of you. So whichever is more comfortable for you, they can talk to you on the phone. You can send them photos. There's various ways that are acceptable to get an assessment for your house for work that you might want to have done to make it more comfortable and lower your carbon footprint. So today's topic is home performance, and we have a guest speaker. I'm very delighted to introduce Dick Kornbluth, who is a nationally recognized expert in building performance. He's the board chair of the Building Performance, this is hiding my text so I can't read it, Institute. And he's on the board of the Building Performance Association. He has 43 years of experience as a residential retrofit installation contractor. And he is in a consulting relationship with our HeatSmart neighbors, HeatSmart CNY. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Dick for the presentation on home performance. So let me stop and go ahead, Dick, when you're ready. Share your screen.
I gotta find it now. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk about what is home performance contracting. I'm going to talk a little bit of building science. I'm going to talk about where heat is lost and how to fix it. And I want to just get started quickly with some questions. So how's your house working for you? Are there rooms too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter? Do you have ice dams or icicles in the wintertime hanging off your roof? Do you have any moisture-related damage? Do you have mold issues in your house? Do you have excessive dust? Do you have unreasonably high utility bills? These are the kinds of issues that home performance contractors address. And you'll notice it's not just about the bills. It's really about the health, safety, durability, comfort, and maintenance of your house. Home performance contractors are problem solvers by definition. Okay, so I'm going to start out with a little bit of building science, because everything that home performance contractors do is based on an understanding of how houses work. So the basic principle of building science is that a house is a system, and a system is always a group of interrelated parts that interact with each other. So we're going to look quickly at the parts of the house system. First of all, there's the envelope. That's the part of the house that separates the heated and conditioned part of the house from the outside world. There are the mechanical systems in the house, which is everything in the house that either consumes energy or produces energy. So it's furnaces and water heaters and fans and computers and appliances, et cetera, including your lights. And the third component of the house system are the people and the occupants. Believe it or not, by their behavior and the way they act, they actually influence how the house works. And all three of these structural components interact with three environmental variables, which are the movement of heat and moisture and air to produce the house system. And the most important thing to take away from this diagram is that In other words, all of these parts of the system and the movement of these environmental variables are all interconnected, so that if you alter one thing or one part of the house, it can have consequences for the other parts of the house and the circumstances around that are not always obvious. And I'm going to give you a case study to illustrate the point. So I'm going to talk about how mechanical systems can have an impact on the envelope of the system through the movement of moisture, and how those interactions can be sometimes not obvious to people. So this is first an understanding of what furnaces do. They burn fossil fuels and they make heat. And when they burn fossil fuels, they produce, besides the heat, they produce two things. They produce carbon dioxide and they produce water. In fact, they produce a lot of water. If you have a 100,000 BTU furnace or boiler in your house, for every hour that that furnace or boiler is running, you are producing a gallon of water. So the rule is 100,000 BTUs of natural gas will, when it's burned, will produce a gallon of water. Where does that water go? Well, in a properly designed house, and furnace and heating system is vented up the chimney and is then safely removed from the building. What happens if that doesn't take place? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about. This is an actual customer of ours. She called us for an attic insulation estimate. She had a tiny little ranch house on a slab. During the assessment, we noticed there was mold growing along the edge of the ceiling on the rear addition. And we said, where did that come from? And she said she had no idea, but the only thing that she could relate was that the mold began after she had her furnace replaced. So let's look at her house. This is her house. It's a small ranch house. It's basically one room, two rooms, which is a bedroom and then a common living room and kitchen area. And on the back of the house, where there was a small addition which she was using as a dining room. In the middle of the house was the utility room. There was a washer, dryer, there was a forced air furnace, and there was a water heater. So what did we notice? We noticed mold growing right along the edge of the roof and the ceiling in the addition. Question is, where did that mold come from and what caused it to appear? Well, first of all, in order for mold to appear, you need several things. You need a fuel, a cellulosic fuel, for example, the paper on sheetrock. So mold likes to grow on sheetrock, but it's actually growing on the paper of the sheetrock. You need sufficiently high temperature, and in a conditioned house, in a conditioned space, the temperature is sufficiently high. But the thing that's most important for mold growth is moisture. Mold does not grow on dry surfaces. Mold only grows on wet surfaces. So the question is, how did that spot in the house get wet? And here's where the part gets interesting. In a typical forced air furnace, which is working properly, you turn the fan on, and let's say you put 2 units of warm air into the living space. At the exact same time, you will be returning 2 units of cooler air to be reheated and then redistributed to the house. If you look at it mathematically, you're supplying 2 units and you're returning 2 units, and the net effect is 0. But let's look at a slightly different circumstance. Let's look at a house where there just happens to be a leak on the return side. And in this case, I put it in a basement because that makes the diagram easier to work. But let's turn on the fan. You're supplying 2 units of warm air to the house, but you might only be bringing 1 unit of warm air back from the living space because the second unit that's coming back to neutralize the supply is coming from the basement through that return leak. What does that mean? Well, on the supply side, which is up here, you're actually putting more air into that living space than you're taking out. And that's going to cause pressure. And that pressure is going to increase air leakage and exfiltration from the building. But what's more critical is that on the return side in the basement, you're creating a vacuum. You're sucking the air out of the basement into the furnace. And what vacuums create is negative pressure. And nature doesn't like a vacuum. It's going to want to find a hole to the outside of the building to bring air in to neutralize that vacuum. And the easiest hole it can find in a classic traditional atmospheric furnace situation is the chimney. so it's going to cause backdrafting. So the return leak on the furnace causes a vacuum in the basement, which causes either the water heater or the furnace itself to backdraft. You'll notice there's two arrows. The red arrow is carbon dioxide, but the blue arrow is water vapor. So in a case where you have a return leak on a furnace that's causing backdrafting, you are bringing water vapor back down the flue into the building. So now let's look at her house. Here's the utility room. In the wintertime, what would happen is when her furnace would run, this problem occurred because when they replaced her furnace, she had a very, very small house, so she did not have a ducted return. She simply had a grill in the wall between the utility room and the corridor, in the corridor in the house. So when the furnace was reinstalled, they did not attach the return plenum of the furnace to the grill. The result was that instead of the return air coming from the hallway, the return air came from inside the utility room, which created negative pressure in the utility room, especially when the door was closed, which caused water vapor to be drawn back into the building. And where did that water vapor go? Well, when they insulated the addition, they didn't get the insulation all the way out to the end of the ceiling, which created a cold spot. Water condensed on the cold spot of the ceiling, and lo and behold, that's where the mold formed. The point of all this is that there was an interaction that was a relationship between a faultily installed furnace and the building envelope or shell of her house that created a mold problem. As a little side story, she told us that before she called us, she called a roofer, and said he would fix the problem by putting a new roof on. And she called Sears, and they told her she needed new siding. Thank God she did not bite on any of those bullets, those cherries. So that's how building science works in a building. The home performance contractor would figure this problem out and make that connection and solve that problem. Right, let's talk about the attic. So your house is like a hot air balloon that's actually anchored to the ground. Hot air balloons rise because of warm air inside the balloon. Your house is like a hot air balloon. In the wintertime, warm air naturally rises through the building, and it actually creates a measurable positive pressure at the top of the building. And one of the things that's important about this is look at the size of the arrows. The largest positive pressure that's generated by stack effect, which is what we call this warm air rising through the building, is at the top of the building, at the highest point in the building, which happens to be at the ceiling of the conditioned space. At the exact same time that it's creating positive pressure at the top of the building, this natural movement of warm air, which takes place, by the way, in any heated building in the wintertime, in cold weather, any place on the planet, this is taking place. At the same time that it's creating positive pressure at the top of the building, it's creating negative pressure at the bottom of the building. And that causes more infiltration to occur at the bottom of the building, which in this case could be a basement. And once again, the largest arrows are at the lowest point. So let's talk about the attic. Where are the holes? If we're going to talk about heat being lost because of stack effect, it's because warm air must be escaping into the attic. Well, where is it happening? Well, there's holes all over buildings that are, some of which are more obvious than others. There's gaps around chimneys. There's attic hatches that aren't weather stripped. There's recessed light fixtures that leak. There's bathroom fans that leak. This is just a few of the kinds of holes that exist. There are also plumbing chases. Every building that I know has a soil stack, which is a pipe that starts literally in the basement and runs all the way through the house and exits through the roof. And the space around that pipe is essentially a giant highway for warm air to escape into the attic. But if you have electrical wiring in your house, the chances are that there might be a hole in the top of a partition wall carrying wires to a switch or to an outlet. Those holes are actually gaps where air leaks. So there's many, many places like this where air can leak into the attic. Why is this important? Because this is the kind of thing that happens in houses that are not air sealed, even when those houses have insulation in the attic, totally due to the warm air leaking into the attic. And how does that happen? Well, when heat leaks into an attic, and there's snow on the attic, people don't realize that snow is a really, really good insulator. So the bottom layer of snow is actually not seeing the coldest temperature outside. But when that roof warms up because of heat loss, that snow will melt. And when the snow melts, the water runs to the edge of the roof. And when it reaches the edge of the roof, it refreezes and forms icicles, unless we have a really long cold spell, in which case that the icicles don't form, but what we get is ice dams. Ice dams are dangerous because as water freezes, it expands. And if there's water in contact with the roof freezing, it can literally force its way underneath the shingles, then melt and literally cause interior damage to the house. So why is insulation not sufficient to prevent heat loss from air movement? Well, think about a wool sweater. Someone wears a wool sweater on a very calm day, they'll be perfectly comfortable. But the minute that the wind picks up, that wool sweater doesn't do much good because it's porous. It's designed not to stop air from movement. So if you have a wool sweater, air is going to go through it. It's going to cool your body off and render you less comfortable. So what do? What you do is you put on a windbreaker. So a windbreaker actually stops the wind from blowing. And in fact, a windbreaker makes a wool sweater work better because it stops the cold air from degrading the insulation performance of the wool sweater. Well, certain insulation is like a wool sweater. Fiberglass insulation, loose blown fiberglass, loose blown cellulose, they are the most common materials that are used in attic insulation, and they are just like the wool sweater. They're porous and air goes through them. So what do? Well, what we do is we air seal them. If you're walking outside, you put a windbreaker on. If you're insulating an attic, you air seal and you stop the movement of that warm air that literally will degrade the performance of the insulation. So let's talk about the basement. So we're back to our diagram of stack effect. And as I noted, the problem with basements is that there is the largest negative pressure at the bottom of the basement. What does that mean? It means that if you have any leaks to the outside of the building at the bottom of the basement, it's going to suck in cold air. The most common one and the most important one is actually the rim joist, which is where the wood framing sits on top of the foundation. Believe it or not, that's never really an airtight joint, and air can literally leak through that joint. It's also, if you have any penetrations through the foundation, like dryer vents or faucets, for example, in this case, those areas also can be leaky. And you'll note then the largest heat loss due to air leakage is out the top, but the largest cold air coming in, which degrades adds heating load to the building, is going to be at the bottom of the building in the basement. So the first thing to do is address the attic, and the second thing is to address the basement, and then the letter C is for conditioned space. I am a really big proponent of wall insulation. Many people think that you can't do wall insulation because it'll damage the house or damage the siding. But for clapboards and shingles and aluminum siding and vinyl siding, skilled technicians can take the siding off. You'll notice it's not all removed. He takes all there's studs every 16 inches. He's taking off enough siding to access each of those stud spaces, and he can do this throughout the whole house, and he can insulate the house and put the siding back on, and there'll be virtually no evidence that that contractor was there when they're done. So with almost all siding types, it's totally possible to insulate the walls. Well, why bother insulating the walls? First of all, it can be done with minimal damage to the siding. Wood shingles, clapboards, aluminum and vinyl siding can be removed and reinstalled. There's a huge reduction in heat loss by insulating the walls of a building. If you have 3 inches of insulation in your attic and you have no insulation in your walls, you are going to save more energy insulating your walls than you will if you add more insulation to the attic, because insulation is diminishing returns. And starting from an R of 4, which is an empty wall, versus an R of 11, which is an attic, it's actually a huge difference in starting points. So there's actually more savings by insulating the walls. There's also a huge significant improvement in comfort. And finally, people don't realize it, but insulating walls is an incredible noise reducer. And one of the things that we never talk about when I was in the business was how quiet the houses got after the walls were insulated, but it is an additional benefit. And that's it for me. I'm done. 16 minutes, Lisa. So there you go. Last slide. I hope I didn't go too fast. I tried to cover a lot of ground, and if there's any questions, please feel free to ask them.
So thank you so much, Dick. That was really great. I wanted to talk a little bit before turning it over to the Q&A about some special incentives that are available on a temporary basis that will help pay for this kind of work for a lot of people. So thanks to some special relief funds from New York State until December 31st, there are additional incentives. So the Empower program will give you a grant up to $10,000 to have building envelope work, insulation and air sealing work done if your household is earning below 60% of median income. So that if you qualify for HEAP, you will qualify for this $10,000 in work. And there's nothing you have to pay. It's completely free. But a lot of people earn a little bit too much to qualify for Empower. And for those folks, there's something called assisted home performance. Normally, assisted home performance is for folks earning up to 80% of median income. But as the COVID relief, it's been expanded to up to 120% of median income. And for those folks, you can get a matching grant of up to $5,000. So you can get, if you get $10,000 of work done, the state will pay half of that through assisted home performance. To give you an idea of what 120% of median income is, that for a household size of 4, you would have to be earning under $115,000 a year. So the bigger the household size, the higher that threshold. And additionally, there are additional grants that might be available to you through the Finger Lakes Climate Fund, who are our HeatSmart partners, and that's on a case-by-case basis. So if you qualify for any of the above, the assisted home performance, but it's still not enough for you to move forward, then you may be able to get an additional grant from the Finger Lakes Climate Fund. On our website, you can see what the income thresholds are for both of those programs for your household size. So I also want to introduce, in addition to HeatSmart CNY, Dick Kornbluth and Lindsay Spear, who's their program director, our HeatSmart Building Envelope partners, Halco Energy and Snug Planet. They are also going to introduce themselves, and they're here to also answer your questions in addition to me and Lindsay and Dick. They've gone through special training to be assisted home performance contractors who can help you get those grants and walk you through all the paperwork. So, and they're building envelope specialists in addition to being heat pump installers. So how to get started? Well, if you are interested in getting a proposal to have this kind of work done at your house, you need to first enroll with HeatSmart. If you are in Tompkins or Chemung County, then please enroll on heatsmarttompkins.org. But if you're in Cayuga, Cortland, Madison, Onondaga, or Oswego County, enroll with HeatSmart CNY. And you can select from our installer partners who you want to have come to your house or call you on the phone or email you to give you a proposal for what kind of work you might need to get done in your house. And there's no obligation or cost to you. These assessments are absolutely free, and you are not obligated to enter into a contract with anybody if you have this work done. So thanks for listening. If you haven't already introduced yourself in the chat, please say who you are and where you live and maybe how you heard about this webinar. And I can send this, but this is the contact information for the various HeatSmart programs that Dick showed you before. So if you just want to take a screenshot of this, also you can contact me or Lindsay directly through our websites. We have phone number and emails there. Okay, so I think that's it for me. Yep. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.